Episode 52, A Tribute to Moms, and a special interview with Meg Chlebek. Welcome to Longing for More, where professionals haunted by the knowing that they were created for more come to strengthen their faith and find the path to stop wasting time in boredom or overwhelm and instead live a life of fulfillment and peace. Today, I am so excited to bring to you an interview with a very dear friend of mine. Meg Chlebek is a gal who I met, about 18 months ago. We did our first coaching exercise together in our mastery program, and we hit it off immediately and have become very fast friends ever since. Although today's episode is titled A Tribute to Moms, I just want you to know that this session will apply to you no matter what stage in life you are. There is wisdom in Meg's words for mothers, for parents, for teenagers. It's just full of amazing information, and you aren't going to want to miss a word of it. So thanks for stopping by today. Enjoy the interview. What I want to do, Meg, is have you just tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll take off from there, okay?
A little bit about me. Okay. I'm Meg Chlebek. I am first and foremost a stay-at-home mama and wife. And I coach. I'm a health and life coach part-time when my kiddos are at school. We live a different kind of lifestyle, I guess. My husband and I would like to say adventurous and spontaneous in some ways, even though that is not really who I am at my core. That is who he is at his core. And our life has been kind of interesting. We have moved several times. We've been married for 12 years, and in the first about 10 years of marriage, I think we moved 11 times. Things have just kind of been up and down. Life has been crazy. My husband went back to school. I went back to school while our babies were in preschool, and now they're in school, and we're just kind of transitioning to new phases of life.
Yeah, well, that's cool. I think that's really interesting. I don't know that I realized that. I knew that you had moved around, but I don't know that I had realized that many times in your 12 years together. So I like to think that I have a sense of adventure, but I am not going to swap stories with you guys. That's for sure.
Well, just to give you a brief example of that, my husband came home one Friday night, and he got laid off when he was a union pipe fitter. And that was something common, a job ended. Sometimes he'd be off for a day, sometimes a week, until the economy crashed. And then it was a little bit longer. But before that, it really wasn't too long. So one time he came home on a Friday night, and he had been laid off from the job. And we just kind of felt like we wanted to go somewhere. We were just feeling antsy. We were living in Indiana at the time. And we said, let's just go somewhere for a couple days. And we got out a map and started flipping coins. And we tried to see what the closest beach was. And it was Baltimore, Maryland. It's a 10-hour drive. We found one other one. We flipped a coin, and we left. He came home at like 5 o'clock. We left at 10 o'clock that night for a week. Just because.
That's cool. That's cool. I love the draw to the beach, and I have to agree. That's always that's something that we definitely have in common. There's no doubt about that. Then you said something the other day that really struck me. I had been contemplating doing this Mother's Day show, and you made a comment. Do you remember what it was, or do you want me to remind you?
Was it about being a better mom now than I was a few years ago?
Yes. And that just really struck a chord with me, because I think we all evolve and grow through the years. But I would like to just talk about what you meant by that, and maybe some of the things that you think were instruments in that change in your mothering. So first of all, let's talk a little bit. How many kids? How old?
We have 2 kids. They are 7 and 10. We're close to birthdays, so I have to think for a second. They're 7 and 10. We've got birthdays within the next 2 months, and they'll be 8 and 11. We've got a boy and a girl.
Awesome. So tell me, what are some things that when you said you're a better mother now, what did you mean by that?
There, let me count the ways. When you're first mothering, when your babies are little, you don't always know what's going on. You don't always know how to be a parent. And you come into parenthood as a mother, with whatever your experience was with your mom, or with other female role models in your life. If you have aunts, that are close to you, or grandmothers, or mentors, or friends, and you come in with some of their experience, you watch them, you absorb what they do, and how they parent. But then when it's you and you've got this little baby and it's just you and this baby during the day, yes, you have that information from them and you have watched them and you can model some of that. But at the end of the day, you have to figure out your own parenting style. You have to figure out how you're going to do things, because there's no one that you can look at and be like, yes, I want to do it exactly like that person. Everybody has quirks. Everybody has things that you would do a little bit differently. So you have to kind of figure out your own rhythm and groove to parenthood. And along with that, each child is different. Anyone that has more than one child knows how incredibly different they can be, even just from the pregnancies to how they are when they're babies and how they eat or how they communicate. And then when they get older, one child to another, you have a completely different personality, and the way that you're going to parent them or discipline them is going to need to be unique to that child. And so there's a learning curve. That's not something that you can do overnight or understand. There's how many parenting books out there? Like there's just so many different ways that you can be a parent. And I think that one difficult thing, especially for me, I wanted to do things differently, and I wanted to change the way that my family was, the family that I'm creating, the family that my husband and I are building. We wanted to do things differently than the way that our parents did them. So trying to figure out how to make those changes is a process, and it takes time. And there's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days. There's going to be successes and there's going to be failures. And there have been periods of my life where I felt like a failure as a mom. And I'm sure every mother goes through that. Every mother has a situation or maybe a season of life, or just in how you handle certain things that you kind of beat yourself up for and you're not happy about. But I've noticed over the last few years, as I've gone through my coaching training and as I have become healthier and healthier, both in my physical body and in my emotional, body and mind and spirit, that there are just things that change, and notices that I've made, and shifts that have happened. And sometimes we don't recognize them right away. And after, a couple of years of that change being there, then you can be like, oh my goodness, I am so thankful that this is how I am now, that this is the parent that I have become. And you look back and you're like, oh, I'm so glad I don't deal with it like I used to. And one of those for me, a big one for me, is kind of being triggered by the kids. Now, kids are going to trigger you. Kids are going to make you angry. They're going to frustrate you. They're going to make you sad. They're going to make you feel inadequate. They're going to trigger all of the emotions, plus some that you don't even know are out there, And I think that one of the biggest things for me that I've noticed is being able to recognize those triggers and detach from them and not react. And that has been, I think, for me, one of the biggest successes as a parent in the last few years. And that's one I think that I was really noticing when I mentioned that to you the other day, is just being able to notice those triggers and to step back and be like, okay, this child is not attacking me right now. They are not trying to take me to my angry place. They're just trying to express who they are.
I love that. I love that. And I think, if I might, one of the things that I would guess is a huge factor in your ability to not be triggered is growth in your faith through the years as well.
Absolutely. I would say faith, and I would say health in general. And right now I am going through a phase where I am very focused on my spiritual health. And I have been noticing a lot of changes in the past, well, 6 months to a year, about a year, just in my spiritual life. But I believe that health in all areas of life are going to help you to be able to function better in whatever role that you're in. But things just like what you're eating, how much you're sleeping, if you're spending time with God every day, if you're allowing Him to fill you up with the things that you need, the fruits of the Spirit, to be able to parent the way that you want to, or the way that is best for your children. You need to spend time with God to fill up on those things: love, joy, peace, patience, patience, patience.
Exactly.
And if you're not spending that time to be filled up, that's a fruit of the Spirit. So spending time with God, spending time with the Holy Spirit is going to naturally give you those attributes more so than if you are, reading a one-page devotional and running to get breakfast started. If you're taking the time to quiet your mind, and it doesn't have to be an hour or two, wouldn't that be lovely? But it doesn't always have to be that time. Even if you just have 15 minutes, if you're taking time to really be quiet and allow the Spirit to fill you with the fruits that He has for you, you're going to be able to function as a parent and just as a person so much better.
Well, and that's exactly right. Because, when I think back to my years of mothering when my kids were little, a couple of things that you talked about that really struck me is one, as a stepmom, I had my son when Steve and I were married, and then inherited two stepdaughters after we were married, and they were like, I think 6 and 8 when we came together. And when you were talking about the personalities, I remember saying, there's a reason that God gives them to you when they can fit in the palm of your hand, because you learn and you grow with that personality, and you learn some of those things that work and don't work. And when they come into your life and they're there, and you don't know what triggers them or how things are going to interact, it can be really challenging. And so, my word of advice to the stepmoms out there, or the school teachers, or the Sunday school, whatever, is give yourself and give that child a little bit of grace, and room to appreciate and learn to grow together, to understand each other better. So that's really very cool. The other thing that I remember thinking as you were talking, you were talking about getting time into the Word, and I love, there's a friend of mine that I follow on Facebook, and she's a young mom. She's a coach and kind of into, way more into the health and fitness end of things. And what I love is recently she started a deal where she will get in the Word. She'll pick a scripture and she'll write it on a whiteboard, and then she sets it down in front of her while she does her workout. So she's multitasking. And she's contemplating this as she's doing her workout. You know how movement will trigger a thought process that you might not would have otherwise. It really spurs that creativity or whatever. So when she gets a thought on that, then while she's working out, she'll hit pause and she'll go write down those thoughts that she has, and then she'll work out some more, and she'll, and she does Facebook Lives prolifically, and it's just really fun to watch. But I watched one the other day, and it was just, so cool for her to be creative and figure out a way to incorporate two things that are really important in her health into her lifestyle. And I think that what's important is to find out what works for you as an individual. It's kind of like the analogy when, the stewardess comes on when you're on a plane, and she talks about how you always, if there's an event where we need oxygen, put the oxygen mask on yourself first. And I think as mothers, we forget how important that is. And so we give and we give and we give, and we aren't always taking time to nourish ourselves, our minds, our body, our spirits. So anyway, those were a couple of thoughts that I had as you were talking. And I kind of interrupted. Is there anything else that you're thinking about along those lines that we haven't talked about yet?
I don't think so.
Awesome. Are there any words of advice that you would have to mothers or, anybody out there that interacts with children? Any words of advice or tips that you might have that you would help them to be able to feel like, they can start to make that shift and be better, be more calm?
The fruit of the spirit, that's one. I quoted that scripture a lot to myself when my oldest was 4 years old. When my kids were 1 and 4, I just went through a really difficult phase. We Because of one of my husband's jobs, we were actually living in a hotel for 55 days until we decided to do a short-term apartment rental because we didn't know how long we were going to be at that job location. So it was a little stressful with a 1 and 4-year-old in a hotel room. And at the time, my husband was working night shifts. So I had to try to keep them quiet during the day
Mm.
so he could sleep. And while we were doing that, I was angry and I would get frustrated a lot, especially when there was noise. It was like, oh my gosh, why is it so hard for a 1 and 4-year-old to be, quiet? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I found myself, when I would start to feel my body, your body gives you little sensations. When you're starting to get agitated, there's things that go on. Usually there's cues that your body is letting you know, whether your palms get sweaty or whether your heart starts to race or you get butterflies in your stomach. There's usually something that lets you know, hey, I'm kind of starting to feel an emotional reaction to the situation. I've got some anger going on or frustration or something. And so whenever I would start to feel those moments, that's when I would try to just start repeating that scripture in my head. And that's when I memorized. I'm like, okay, there's 9. How many are there? And I would just over and over, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, gentleness, gentleness. And if I was struggling with one area specifically, whether it was patience or gentleness or kindness, I would repeat that word over and over, take a couple deep breaths and just repeat that scripture. And that would help me just kind of focus and be like, this is who you want to be. Focus on that, meditate on that. Just keep saying it over and over until that's how you're reacting. Another thing that has been super beneficial for me is to give myself a timeout. We get mad at our kids and we yell at them sometimes and tell them to go to their rooms and think about their attitudes. But as parents, we need to do that just as much as the kids do. There's times when we're having a conversation and they're saying something that I don't like. And just because I'm the adult, and this is something that it took me a while to kind of wrap my head around, because I want to teach my children to be respectful to adults, but they're learning how to be people. They're learning how to be an adult in how I'm speaking to them. So if I speak down to them like they're subordinate, if I'm speaking down to them, they're not learning how to have a healthy conversation as an adult. So when we get in those situations, instead of me flipping out and being like, you're being disrespectful, go to your room, we're not talking, sometimes I have to say, you know what? I'm getting a little bit emotionally charged in this situation. I feel like you're getting a little bit frustrated too. I think I need to go take a time out so that I don't say something that I don't mean, or so that I don't lose my temper and behave in a way that I don't want to behave. Because I'm trying really hard to learn how to control my emotions. And these are some really big emotions that are coming up for me. And I'm sure that they are for you too. So why don't we just take a break for a minute? So there's times when I literally go to my room and give myself a 5-minute timeout so that I don't blow it, so that I don't lose my temper and behave in a way that I don't want to behave. I don't want to be that person, so I need to create an environment so that I can be the person I want to be. And sometimes that means walking away for a few minutes and just taking a breath.
I love that. I love that. One of the things that I did, and I don't even know that I consciously made a decision, or if I did, when I made that decision, but when I would be in a situation where I would blow up and be angry, I always would go to my son and apologize.
Mm.
And, like I said, I don't know if I ever made a conscious decision. That was just something I did. And I didn't really think that much of it until years later. I think he was even in college. He said to me, Mom, I always knew that when we would have one of those moments, you would be there and you were going to come and we were going to talk about it. And that was really huge for me to realize what an impact, just something that I guess was in my nature that I would just do, stood out to him. And, I'm really proud because he's turned into be a really awesome daddy. And I know I wasn't perfect, but I also know I must have done some things right for him to be the amazing father that he is. So anyway, cool. I love that. I am going to steal your fruit of the spirit.
You know, I absolutely love that you said that you went to him and apologized. And that is something that has actually been very conscious for me. I grew up with a parent who has never apologized to me in my entire life. And I will be 33 next month. And I have one parent who has never, ever uttered the word sorry to me. And
Mm.
that was something that I was very conscious about with my children, because you get to a certain age as a kid where you realize that there's inconsistencies with what your parents do and say, and you realize how other people are behaving, how other adults are behaving. And it's important for your children to know that you're not perfect and that you do make mistakes, because
Right.
that allows them a comfortable space to know it's okay if I'm going to mess up. It's okay if I lose my temper. There's still space for me here. I still belong here. My mom still cares, you know? And sometimes when you get the feeling that your parent doesn't think that anything they did was wrong, you start to feel like you're the one that's wrong and that everything that you're doing is wrong. And it becomes about you and who you are. So I'm so glad that that was something that came natural to you. And that wasn't something that necessarily came natural to me. And I don't think that it is really natural for most people, because when we get angry, we feel like it's justified because of whatever caused us to become angry.
Mm.
So, you know, that sometimes fighting that flesh and that spirit is to be able to say, okay, I know I messed up. Like, I'm really sorry that I handled this situation this way. And I want you to know that that's not appropriate behavior. You know, I want you to know that just because I did it doesn't mean that's the way that you should behave. And that's why I'm taking the time to apologize and tell you this isn't okay. You know, and my kids, they like to say, you know, if I apologize, they like to say, it's okay, mom. And I try to be very, very good about looking at them in the eyes and saying, no, it's not okay. I appreciate that you're telling me that because you're comforting me, but it's not okay. You can tell me that you forgive me, but don't tell me it's okay.
Oh,
And that's
love it.
a distinction that I think is important to make.
Yes, very much so. And really, isn't that parallel to our relationship with God? He
Yes.
forgives us. Doesn't mean that what we did was okay and that we should keep doing it, but he forgives us every single time. This is my first interview under the title of the podcast, Longing for More. And I used to always ask my guests to share something that revived their soul. So I'm going to shift that. And I'm going to ask you if you can tell me about a time maybe when you discovered that your soul was longing for more, or where God was calling you to something different in your life. Do you have an example of that?
Well, I kind of have an example for both of those, and they both have been going on recently. As far as calling me to something different, I'll go ahead and start there first. I got my coaching certificate and I wanted to be a health coach. I wanted to help people learn about food sensitivities, because that completely changed my life, completely changed my health. I found out about food sensitivities 4 years ago. And through eliminating the foods that my body was sensitive to, I was able to drastically reduce my fibromyalgia symptoms. My goal when my son went to kindergarten is when I decided to enroll in the coaching program. I said, okay, my youngest is going to school now. Now it's time for me to do something, to have a project, to have a purpose other than, you know, changing diapers and wiping noses. So I got my certification, but I wanted to just go in and talk about food sensitivities, and they have had a big impact on my life. However, over the past year, I just felt like God was saying, yeah, that's the start, but that's not it. That's not your calling. There's so many people who have had improvement in their health from that. But I felt like he was telling me there's more. You have more to give. You have more of a story. There's something deeper. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go deeper. I didn't want to deal with the fibro and with childhood trauma and deal with that around health, although that greatly affects health too. So recently I've just been feeling like God is calling me to go deeper, and to really help people in a way that is going to be more impactful. Again, the food is like the first step. The food's going to make a difference in how your body is feeling. But if you don't deal with some of the deeper seated issues, if you're not dealing with some of the trauma and the emotional issues, there will be other food issues. There will be binge eating. There will be mindlessness, or, there will be things that are connected to emotions that you may not realize. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That really does. And it's interesting because our both of our coaching practices, I think, are very parallel that way. And that, I too entered in with the intent to be a health coach and just help people eat healthier and be healthier. And I too realized God was calling me to more, and that there is so much more to we need to nourish and support the whole body, all of the areas of our lives. So that's very cool.
Real quick, just to add on to that, I also just want to say that with that change, I feel like God has been telling me that to really fulfill your purpose and your calling, that can only happen if you bring all of who you are into what you're doing.
Yes.
And that can only happen if you take all of the ugliness from your past and are able to show people and are able to tell how God has taken that ugliness and transformed it. And it's through that process, it's through that transformation process of bringing all of you and your pain into your future. That's how you're going to really create impact. And part of, I guess, something that God has really been bringing to mind over the past year is everything has been ultimately for my good and for God's glory. And so I think that if we can focus on that, how do I bring all of this? How is this ugly thing ultimately for my good and God's glory? So
that's beautiful. Yeah, I love it. Thank
so
you.
then that really does parallel and tie into where I feel like what my soul was longing for more of. And that was, I had started to do all of this health stuff. I had kind of, I had some religious practices, routines. We do go to church every week. I read my Bible. I had been reading my Bible occasionally, had a couple different devotional books that I would look through every now and then. But I realized that I was really needing more consistency in that area in my life. And that's something that God has shown me throughout this past year, is really just the importance of consistency in so many things, in so many areas. Every area of life needs consistency. But like I was talking about earlier in our conversation, that you need to be able to be filled up. And if you're not spending that time, it's like a surface relationship. So we all have lots of relationships, right? We have different levels of relationships in our life, different levels of intimacy. And I feel like a lot of times I was treating God like a cousin, or like, more of an acquaintance, or kind of a distant friend, someone that you absolutely love to spend time with. And when you're together, everything's cool, but you only see each other, maybe once a month or something like that. Hey, this one friend I meet for coffee once a month. Like, I love her to death, but there's not a whole lot of connection in between our times together. And I realized that I was treating God more like the cousin that I saw, at family functions. That was my favorite cousin and I want to hang out with, but it was only a couple times a year, or, the friend for coffee. And I realized that I felt like God was, in a way, pursuing me and wanting to have more of a intimate relationship with me, more of like my husband. And that was one thing that was really hard for me. I had a hard time relating to God because of the trauma in my childhood. God was not a father to me, and it was hard to get that parent relationship. It's a little bit easier now that I can see my husband parenting my children, and I see what a good father he is. But that was something that was a little bit difficult for me. So when I transitioned that and I started to think about my relationship with God and my relationship with my husband and comparing them, I thought, you know what? Sometimes my husband and I will be in the same room. Sometimes we really connect. Sometimes we don't. It's not always an emotional experience. Sometimes I'm talking to him and I don't feel like he's listening, but I'm putting that time in. I'm spending that time with him. So there were times when I would read my Bible or I'd spend time with God. I'm like, oh, like I just didn't feel connected. There was no emotional connection. And I thought, you know what? The emotional connection comes after you are consistently spending time with each other. How much time did I spend on the phone getting to know my husband when we were dating, And we've been married for 12 years now. How much time have we put in? Has that all been quality time? Heck no. Absolutely not.
Right.
Probably half of it hasn't really been quality. I mean, life is busy. You kind of just go through the motions. So I kind of had this mindset shift that it's like, okay, if I want to have the relationship with God, an intimate relationship with him, more like I have with my husband, I just got to put in the time. And I realized that the more time that I put in, the more connected I felt, the more emotional it became. And the more I was able to communicate with God on a two-way communication. And that became easier. It wasn't me just praying and saying, God, thank you for this, and please help me with this. But it became, okay, God, who are you going to be for me today? What do you have for me today? How are you going to show your character or yourself, or reveal yourself to me in a new way today that I haven't seen before? And so now it's getting more exciting and more intimate and more, there's this song, this Christian song where it says, it needs to be more like falling in love. I don't know who sings it, and it does. And I think that that's what my soul was longing for it to be more of a friendship and a love relationship rather than an obligation and something that I felt like I was supposed to do.
That's very beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's it right there.
I feel like it's it. I feel like I'm getting to an entirely new place in my life, and it feels really good.
It is. That's amazing. And it's been fun for me to watch some of that on the sidelines. I love that. Do you have a favorite scripture or a favorite saying?
I have had many favorite scriptures over the years, and I don't feel like some of them apply right now. But there's one that, and it's actually, I found it a little phrase that I found in a couple different scriptures that has really stuck out to me lately. And it is to be waiting in expectation, to expect things from God. And that's something that, again, I don't think that I thought of a lot in my life. I went to church, I did the things that I thought I was supposed to do. But when I prayed, I was like, oh, well, who am I for God to answer this prayer? Who am I for him to show up in this big miraculous way in my life? And you know how sometimes, when your kids want something, but they won't ask you, you want them to ask and you wait because you want them to take ownership of that. And you want them to be like, look, this is what I really want, even if you know that they want it. Well, I think that that's sometimes the way that it happens with God. He's like, honey, I've got so much for you. It's right here. It's in my lap. It's in my arms. I'm holding it, and I want to give this to you. Do you want it? Because you don't act like you want it. Do you want it? So I think just waiting in expectation, saying those prayers, and then just waiting, believing, expecting that God is going to do something. God is going to show up in some way. And here's the thing. He may not show up in the way that you want him to, or you think that he's going to, but expectantly waiting for him to show up and looking for how he's going to show up. If you don't mind, can I add
Absolutely.
another little thought? So there have been so many prayers that I've prayed over the course of my life. I was like, God didn't answer that prayer. Why didn't he answer that prayer? Didn't he see how bad I was hurting? And I want to give you a brief example. I didn't live at home until I turned 18. I was in and out of the house a couple times. And when I was 16 years old, I moved out for 9 months. And I had wanted to go live with a family that I babysat for. They had 2 little ones, and I desperately wanted to go live with them for this season that I wasn't at home. And it didn't happen. And I felt like God had just kind of turned his back on me. And I felt like he was saying, you can't have what you want. I know you want a family. I know you want to be connected. I know you want people, but that's not what you get. And so I just felt like he was just kind of leaving me high and dry. Like, why am I always alone? Why am I always feeling this emptiness? And I ended up moving in with a 75-year-old woman that sat next to me in our church choir. And I lived with her for 9 months. And that, as a 16-year-old, I did not want to go live with a 75-year-old woman. I wanted to go live with my mentor, who I babysat for, who I absolutely loved and adored, and, thought the world of her. And so for a long time, I was like, I don't know why God did that to me. I don't know why I had to live with this woman. But let me tell you, that was 16. It's been, half my life later. And now I can see the goodness of God in putting me with her and in that situation. She was a little old school, but she taught me so much. And there are even things that I do today that remind me of her constantly. Like when I do my dishes, when I wash my silverware, I can hear her things that she said to me, and ways that she was. And she was just, she was an amazing woman, and she taught me so much about respect and self-discipline and life and boundaries and how people are different. And that is what I needed at that time in my life. It's not what I wanted, but that's what I needed. And God in his goodness gave that to me and gave me that relationship and let her step in and fill in for me in a maternal way. Yes. In that time frame, in a way that I didn't want because I was 16, but in a way that would impact the rest of my life, ultimately for my good and his glory.
And which is absolutely perfect, because when we started out, we were talking about the fact that this is a Mother's Day episode. And although it's important for mothers, we need to remember that not everyone is a mother or may not be in a mother role, but we have such a huge impact on the people that God brings into our lives. And we need to remember that and be grateful for the opportunity to mentor and love whatever particular situation, whether it's as a boss or coworker or whatever it is. When God brings those people into our lives, we need to embrace that and champion that. And I love that. That is so beautiful. It's been so amazing, but this was exactly what I wanted for today's episode. Is there anything that we haven't said that is your soul is longing to share with us right now?
Wherever you're at, whether you love where you're at or whether you hate where you're at, you have control and you have choices. You have the ability to change. You have the ability to change your circumstances. You have the ability to change your relationships. And it may not happen overnight. It may take years and years, but there is opportunity there. So if you're sitting in a place right now and you're like, oh, I am feeling like a failure right now because I just yelled at my kids, or if you are in a place where you're like, I haven't talked to my mom in 10 years, I want to have a relationship with her, but I can't. No matter where you're at, no matter where you are on that spectrum, you have the ability to start to make changes. And I just want to encourage you that if you are not living the life that you want, if your soul is longing for something more, then go after it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Meg.
You're welcome. Thank you.
What an amazing interview with an amazing woman. I am so blessed to have Meg in my life. Speaking of being blessed of having beautiful women in my life, I would be remiss not to mention my very best friend and my very first friend in the whole world, my own mother. She is pretty incredible, and she has done some amazing things in her life. But I am just forever grateful to her for being the beautiful soul that she is, for encouraging me to take health seriously, but more importantly, encouraging me to reach for and grab the life that I wanted. Whenever I was afraid to do something, she was always right there beside me, cheering me on. And I've always said one of the things I really appreciate about my parents, particularly my mother, is that she always let me make my own mistakes. Even when she knew I was doing something that was not going to end up well, she allowed me the ability to take the information and then do what I would choose to with that. And I believe that has been a huge factor in who I am today. So thank you, Mom, for everything. So I just want to thank you for stopping by today. I know this is longer than usual, much longer than usual, but it is just ripe with wonderful words of wisdom. And I hope that if you are so inclined, you would be willing to go and give us a rating on iTunes. And if you know of someone who would be encouraged by any of these words or might be struggling with parenting, please share this with them. Let them know that there is hope. We always have the opportunity to make changes in our life, and we too can reach for more and become the best that we can be. God created us for amazing things, and He wants us to be that amazing person that He created us to be. So go, live your more, and have a blessed week.